"You're not my real dad," my stepson said with a sneer, while he and my wife used my money for her ex. They made me feel like a doormat, laughed at me during family dinners, and even kicked me out of my own house. I just laughed. 3 days later, they all wished they hadn't said those things. "Oh, you're not even my real dad." Those words still ring in my ears, but not for the reason Jimmy thought. Let me explain how I ended up laughing while my wife and stepson looked at me in shock. Last night, I had been married to Alice for 3 years. When we first got together, everything was great. Jimmy was 14, and even though he wasn't excited about having a stepdad, he was polite. I tried my best to support him without being too pushy. I helped him with homework when he asked, went to his games, and gave him space when he needed it. The first sign I missed was how Jimmy and his dad, James, kept having secret phone calls. I'd hear Jimmy whispering in his room or hanging up quickly when I walked by. I thought it was just normal teenager stuff. The second sign was when Alice insisted on managing all our money by herself. About 6 months ago. "You're busy. Let me handle it," she said. Like a fool, I agreed. Things started to go downhill about 2 months ago. Jimmy became more and more rude, not just normal teenage behavior. He was being really disrespectful. He made fun of my clothes, my car, and even how I ate. Alice would laugh and say, "Oh, he's just being a teenager." But the looks they shared afterward, I should have noticed. I started paying closer attention and saw big withdrawals from our joint bank account. Always when I was busy at work, Alice had reasons for everything: car repairs, school fees, family emergencies. But the numbers didn't add up. Last night was supposed to be a normal family dinner. I saw Jimmy smirking at his phone during the meal. Alice kept giving him little nods. Finally, Jimmy put his phone down and looked right at me. "We need to talk," he said, trying to sound tough. "Mom's not happy. I'm not happy, and you need to leave." I set down my fork. "Excuse me?" Alice jumped in. "You're right, Gary, this isn't working. We want you out by the end of the week." I stayed quiet, knowing they had more to say. "You've been controlling and manipulative," Alice continued, gaining confidence from my silence. "Jimmy deserves better." "I deserve better." "Yeah," Jimmy sneered. "You're not even my real dad. You can't tell me what to do anymore." "Dad says..." "What?" I interrupted, finally understanding what his dad had been saying. They both started talking at once about how James was going to move back in, how they had been planning this for months, and how they would use my money to help James start his new business. They thought they had it all figured out. I started to laugh, not a happy laugh, but the kind that makes people feel uneasy. Both of them stopped talking. "Let me be very clear," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is my house. The deed is in my name. Those joint accounts you've been draining, that's just a small part of what I have. And about James's new business? Check the ownership papers carefully." I stood up and dialed a number. "You have until tomorrow at noon to pack your bags. Security will be here in 20 minutes to change all the locks and codes. I've already called my lawyer." Alice's face turned pale. "You can't do this." "We're married." "For now," I replied, walking to my office. "Oh, and Jimmy, you're right. I'm not your real dad. A real dad wouldn't have spent your college fund on his failing business. Ask your mom about that." The security company arrived while they were still yelling and making threats. I sat in my office, sending emails to my lawyer and bank, listening to them realize how badly they had miscalculated. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a big plan. Sometimes it's just being ready and watching people face the results of their own actions. Update. The morning after the argument was strange. I was drinking my coffee in the kitchen when Alice stormed down the stairs, her face red with anger. She waved her phone around, yelling about her Apple Pay not working at Starbucks. "What did you do?" she shouted, getting right in my face. I calmly took another sip of coffee. "I protected my assets, Alice. Like any sensible person would when they find out their spouse has been secretly sending money to their ex." Jimmy ran down next, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Mom, the PlayStation subscription got canceled. And I can't get into Netflix or HBO!" I couldn't help but smile. "Those were all on my accounts, buddy. The ones you said I was too stupid to protect." Alice tried to use her credit card to order food, declined. Her Uber account was suspended, and even her Amazon Prime stopped working. The realization that I had cut off every subscription hit her hard. "You can't do this to us," she screamed, throwing her phone at the wall, and it cracked against the kitchen. James will what?" I interrupted, pulling out my phone to show her my recent text exchange with her ex. You mean the James who's been avoiding my calls about the money you've been giving him? The James who just blocked me when I asked about a potential audit? Jimmy started pacing, running his hands through his hair. Whatever. My college fund is still safe. Dad would never— Your college fund? I laughed, pulling up the bank statements I'd saved. You mean the account your parents drained last month? Yeah, I found those transfers too. Looks like you spent your future on some interesting things. The color drained from Jimmy's face as I showed him the proof. Designer clothes, expensive electronics, spa treatments, all bought with his college money. Alice tried to grab the papers, but I had already made copies. My lawyer chose that moment to ring the doorbell. Alice's face changed from anger to fear when she saw the envelope. She refused to take the divorce papers, so he just placed them on the counter. You have 48 hours to leave the house, I said calmly. Security will be here to help you out if needed. The next hour was chaos. Alice tried calling James repeatedly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She left desperate messages, her voice breaking as she realized her safety net was gone. Jimmy's tough guy act fell apart when he found out his gaming. PC and most expensive sneakers were actually bought on my credit card. I'd already reported them as unauthorized purchases. The look on his face when the collection company called about picking them up was priceless. They spent the rest of the day frantically packing, cursing me, threatening lawsuits, and trying to take anything that wasn't bolted down. The security cameras I'd set up caught Alice trying to sneak out with my watches, and the police officer who came to check things out wasn't impressed. By evening, reality had hit them hard. Alice's friends stopped talking to her once they learned what she had done. James finally answered a call just to tell them he didn't have space for them to stay. I overheard their conversation from my office. He actually laughed when Alice begged for help. The final straw was Jimmy's Instagram meltdown. He posted a long rant about me, calling me all sorts of names. Within minutes, proof of their scams started flooding the comments. It turned out they had done similar things with Alice's past relationships. The truth finally caught up with them. They left the next morning in Alice's old BMW, which was probably about to be taken back soon due to unpaid loans I discovered. Jimmy couldn't even slam the door properly. It just made a sad squeaking noise. I changed the codes, replaced the locks, and poured myself another cup of coffee. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. You'll regret this. We'll make your life miserable. I smiled, remembering all the evidence safely stored with my lawyer. Looking forward to it, I replied, then blocked her number. The house felt different that night, quieter, cleaner somehow. I ordered pizza, watched a movie without anyone complaining about my choice, and slept better than I had in months. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the results of their own actions. But this was just the beginning. I had a feeling they hadn't quite learned their lesson yet. Update 2. For those keeping up, this is part 3 of my ongoing story. Check my earlier posts for parts 1 and 2. The past few weeks have been pure chaos, but in a way, it's satisfying to watch it all unfold. Remember how I mentioned I had a share in James's business? Well, that little detail came in handy sooner than I thought. Last Tuesday, I was sitting at my kitchen counter, enjoying my morning coffee when my phone started buzzing with notifications. It turns out Alice had gone on a social media rampage, posting a bunch of edited screenshots of our old text, conversations on Facebook and Instagram, trying to make me look like a monster. The best part? She accidentally included messages where she was bragging to her friend about spending money from our joint account on James's business. I didn't even have to do anything. Her own friend started calling her out in the comments. Didn't you just post about your luxury spa weekend last month? Weren't you bragging about Jimmy's new gaming setup? The backpedaling was amazing to watch. Speaking of Jimmy, his spoiled attitude finally caught up with him at school. He tried using the same manipulative tricks he used at home with his teachers. Bad move. He got caught trying to change his grades on the school portal. Guess who paid a friend to hack it? The school board wasn't impressed. They're letting him graduate. But he's banned from all senior activities, including prom. When he tried to blame it on stress from home, the principal pulled up screenshots of his Instagram stories bragging about the hack. But here's where it gets really interesting. Remember James, the fantastic ex-husband who could do no wrong? Well, without my money flowing to Alice, his true colors showed quickly. Alice called me crying. I blocked her number. But she used her work phone because James kicked them out after she couldn't pay the rent he was charging. Apparently, he's been illegally renting out his apartment. And now they're all facing eviction. I got an unexpected visit from James at my office. He was trying to act tough, demanding I take Alice and the kid back because he couldn't handle their drama. I just smiled and reminded him about that ownership stake I mentioned. You see, I had been quietly documenting every questionable business deal he made using the money Alice sent him. Nothing illegal, just very ethically questionable. The look on his face when I pulled out the folder was priceless. The real justice? Their mutual friends started reaching out to me. Turns out Alice and James had been bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen. But their stories kept changing. Someone finally got suspicious and started asking questions. The truth came out in bits and pieces. The money manipulation. The lies, everything. I ran into Jimmy at the grocery store yesterday. He looked rough. No more designer clothes or the latest iPhone. He was buying ramen with loose change. For a moment, I almost felt bad. Then I remembered how he laughed while calling me a pathetic loser at that last dinner. He saw me too. The first time I've seen him look embarrassed instead of arrogant. Alice lost her job last week, not because of me. She did that all by herself. Apparently, she tried to use company resources to find dirt on me, hoping to find something she could use against me. Instead, she got caught accessing confidential files without permission. Her boss, who I'd never even met, called to give me a heads up because he'd seen the screenshots of her, admitting to financial manipulation, and wanted to warn me about her trying to misuse company resources. It's interesting watching their house of cards fall apart. Every scheme they tried has spectacularly backfired. They're now living on James's sister's couch, the same sister who used to join them in mocking me at family gatherings. Karma truly does come full circle. The best part? I haven't had to do anything except sit back and watch them ruin themselves. Every attempt they've made to fix their situation has just made it worse. Alice tried to claim I stole from her joint accounts. The bank showed her documented transfers to James. Jimmy tried to play the victim at school. His own social media posts proved otherwise. James tried to threaten me. His own paperwork ruined his credibility. My lawyer says the divorce should be finalized soon. Alice's last-ditch effort to claim emotional distress fell apart when her own Facebook posts showed her bragging about manipulating me. At this point, I almost feel like I should thank them. They've made everything easier by documenting their own bad behavior. I hear they're looking at apartments in a bad part of town now. Big change from the fancy lifestyle they thought they had secured. Guess karma doesn't treat gold diggers and their helpers kindly. Update. Just got a text from Jimmy's school. Apparently, he tried to say I promised to pay for his college. The school asked for proof and found our prenup specifically said college. Expenses weren't included. These people really don't learn. Final update. It's been exactly 8 months since everything happened, and karma finally caught up with them. I was getting coffee at the local store when I saw Alice and James arguing in the parking lot of their rundown apartment complex across the street. They were living in a place where the rent signs always say no credit check in faded red letters. You promised, Jimmy. You'd help with his tuition. Alice was screaming, her designer purse clearly a knockoff, swinging wildly. He's your son. James, looking much more worn out than when he was living off my money, shot back. I promised when I thought your rich husband was paying. I can barely make rent. I couldn't help but smile into my coffee. The apartment they were fighting in front of was a far cry from my 4-bedroom house they tried to take from me. Last I heard, Jimmy had to turn down his acceptance to state because neither of his parents could co-sign his loans. He's working at the mall now, the same one where he used to spend my money on expensive sneakers. The real karma hit last week. Jimmy showed up at my door, looking nothing like the cocky kid who'd yelled, "You're not even my real dad," at me. His eyes were red, and he wore a cheap work uniform like the one I used to wear at his age. "Gary, I messed up," he stammered. "Mom and Dad keep fighting about money. Dad's girlfriend kicked us out because he spent her rent money. Mom's working 2 jobs now. I didn't know." I let him stand there for a moment, remembering all the times he'd called me controlling for suggesting he get a summer job. "I'm sorry," he blurted out. "I was such a jerk to you. You tried to teach me about money and responsibility, and I thought Dad was so cool because he always said yes to everything, but he was just spending your money. And Mom kept saying you were trying to control us. but you were the only one really looking out for me. I could have shut the door. Part of me wanted to. Instead, I said, "Come back Saturday morning at 8:00 a.m. sharp. We'll talk." He showed up at 7:45, which was the first surprise. We sat on my porch, and I laid it out straight. "I'm not giving you money. That's not what this is about. But if you're serious about turning things around, I'll help you make a plan. Real work, real consequences, real results. Your choice." Jimmy nodded, looking more like a man than the boy who'd left 8 months ago. "I want to learn for real this time." That was 3 weeks ago. He's been showing up every Saturday since, learning about budgeting, work ethic, and how to deal with his parents' manipulation. Alice found out and showed up, screaming about how I was turning her baby against her. The neighbors probably enjoyed that show. "You think you've won?" she yelled from my driveway. "You think you can just take my son?" I stepped onto the porch, calm as could be. "Alice, the only person who lost anything here is Jimmy, and that's on you and James. Now get off my property before I call the cops again." She left, but not before throwing her fake designer purse at my car. The security cameras caught it all, just like they caught her keying my car last month. Her next paycheck is going straight to my lawyer, just like the last one. Yesterday, Jimmy told me he's enrolling in community college next semester. He's paying for it himself with the money he saved from his mall job. For the first time in his life, he actually looked proud of himself. James still calls sometimes, usually drunk, alternating between threats and begging for loans. I've saved all the voicemails. My lawyer loves getting those updates for the harassment case. The house is quieter now. Sometimes I miss the family I thought I had, but watching karma do its job, that's better than any revenge I could have planned. Alice and James are struggling with the consequences of their own actions. As for Jimmy, well, he's finally growing up. I heard from mutual friends that Alice has been telling people I ruined her family. I just laugh. They ruined themselves. I just refuse to let them ruin me too. If you enjoyed this Reddit story and want to hear more, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thrilling content. Your support means a lot. Thank you for being part of this journey.